Have you ever noticed how the people who seem the most unforgettable are rarely the ones chasing attention? They're not always the loudest, the funniest, or even the most attractive, yet somehow they leave a mark on everyone's mind. People think about them long after they've left the room, wonder what they're doing, and secretly crave more of their presence. This isn't luck and it isn't magic. According to the timeless principles popularized by Robert Greene, desire isn't created by giving people everything they want. It's created by making them imagine what they can't fully have. Human psychology is wired to value what feels rare, mysterious, and just beyond reach. The more available you become, the more predictable you seem. But the moment you create space, uncertainty, and intrigue, something fascinating happens inside the human mind. People begin filling in the blanks themselves, projecting their fantasies, expectations, and emotions onto you. Suddenly, you're no longer just another person. They've turned you into an idea they can't stop thinking about. And the most surprising part is that this process begins long before anyone realizes it's happening. In fact, there are a few subtle psychological principles that quietly shape attraction, influence, and obsession every single day. And once you understand the first one, you'll never look at human behavior the same way again. The first principle is simple but deeply uncomfortable for most people to practice. Stop trying to convince everyone to like you. The more desperately you seek approval, the more you communicate that your value depends on someone else's opinion. Human beings are incredibly sensitive to social signals, and confidence is often judged not by what you say, but by what you don't need to prove. When someone appears emotionally complete, without demanding constant validation, they instantly become more intriguing. This is because scarcity isn't only about time or availability. It is also about emotional access. Robert Greene repeatedly emphasizes that mystery creates desire because the human mind naturally obsesses over unanswered questions. Think about the movies, books, and songs that stayed with you the longest. They didn't reveal everything at once. They left pieces missing, forcing your imagination to complete the picture. People work the same way. When you reveal every thought, every feeling, and every detail of your life immediately, you remove the opportunity for curiosity to grow. But when you allow people to discover you gradually, every interaction becomes another piece of a puzzle they genuinely want to solve. This doesn't mean pretending to be cold or playing manipulative games. It means understanding that your entire identity doesn't need to be available on demand. Silence can often say more than endless explanations, and confidence frequently looks like patience rather than performance. The irony is that the less you chase attention, the more attention begins to chase you. Yet this is only the beginning, because the next psychological principle explains why people often become most attached at the exact moment they feel they might lose someone. The next principle revolves around one of the strongest forces in human psychology, the fear of loss. People often believe they value what they possess, but in reality, they value most what they believe they could lose. This is known as loss aversion, and it shapes countless decisions, relationships, and emotions without people even realizing it. When someone feels completely certain that you'll always be there no matter how they behave, your presence slowly becomes part of the background. Familiarity replaces excitement, and appreciation quietly fades into expectation. But the moment your attention is no longer guaranteed, the mind reacts differently. Suddenly, your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. Memories become more vivid, conversations replay in their head, and they begin questioning whether they overlooked something valuable. Robert Greene points out that anticipation often creates stronger emotions than possession itself. It's the waiting, the uncertainty, and the possibility that ignite desire. This doesn't mean disappearing to manipulate people or creating artificial distance. It means building a life so meaningful that your attention naturally becomes selective rather than unlimited. When your purpose, ambitions, and self-respect come before the need for constant reassurance, people sense that your time has value. And because your time has value, so does your presence. The most magnetic individuals aren't difficult to reach because they're playing games. They're difficult to reach because they're genuinely invested in their own growth, passions, and mission. That quiet independence sends a powerful message. Being part of your life is a privilege, not a guarantee. Ironically, the less your happiness depends on someone else's attention, the more your attention becomes something others hope to earn. And once people begin investing emotionally in earning your attention, another psychological mechanism quietly takes over, one that makes them feel increasingly connected to you with every small investment they choose to make. The more someone invests in you, the more valuable you become in their own mind. This is one of the most overlooked truths about human psychology. Most people believe that making someone crave them means giving more, doing more, texting more, explaining more, and sacrificing more. But the human brain often values what it has worked to earn rather than what was handed over effortlessly. Robert Greene highlights that desire grows through participation, not passive consumption. When someone invests their time, energy, emotions, and attention into understanding you, they begin creating an emotional attachment that feels completely natural. Every meaningful conversation, every shared experience, every thoughtful gesture becomes evidence in their mind that you matter. Psychologists call this the effort justification effect. The harder people work for something, the more they convince themselves it must be valuable. This is why people often become emotionally attached to relationships they have invested heavily in, even when those relationships are imperfect. The investment itself strengthens the emotional bond. But there's an important distinction between healthy investment and manipulation. You're not trying to make people chase you endlessly. You're allowing relationships to develop with balance, where both people contribute instead of one person carrying the entire emotional weight. When you stop over-explaining, stop solving every problem for everyone, and stop making yourself endlessly available, you create room for others to participate. They begin asking questions, initiating conversations, remembering details about you, and finding reasons to stay connected. That mutual investment creates a bond that feels authentic because it grows naturally instead of being forced. At the same time, another subtle transformation begins to happen. People stop seeing you as someone seeking their approval and start seeing you as someone whose approval carries weight. And once that shift occurs, every interaction changes, because the psychology of respect always comes before the psychology of desire. The respect is the silent foundation of lasting attraction. Without it, attention fades, admiration weakens, and desire eventually disappears. Robert Greene argues that people are naturally drawn to those who possess an unshakable sense of self, not because they dominate others, but because they refuse to compromise their identity for temporary acceptance. One of the fastest ways to lose someone's interest is to abandon your values. The moment you fear losing them, the more you reshape yourself to fit another person's expectations, the less authentic you become. And authenticity is what creates genuine magnetism. People may enjoy being admired, but they deeply respect those who have standards, boundaries, and the courage to walk away from situations that diminish their self-worth. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or emotionally distant. It means understanding that confidence is expressed through consistency. Your words match your actions. Your emotions are guided by reason instead of impulse, and your decisions reflect your long-term values rather than your short-term fears. Ironically, when people realize they cannot control your emotions or predict every move you make, they begin paying closer attention. They notice the calmness with which you handle conflict, the patience you display under pressure, and the quiet certainty that doesn't require constant validation. That emotional stability becomes incredibly attractive because it feels rare in a world where most people react impulsively to every disappointment or moment of uncertainty. Instead of desperately trying to keep everyone close, you become selective about who earns access to your time, energy, and trust. And that selectiveness sends a powerful psychological message. Your presence has value because it isn't given away without thought. The people who truly matter will recognize that value, while those who only wanted convenience will quietly drift away. In the end, making someone crave you has very little to do with making them think about you every minute of the day. It has everything to do with becoming the kind of person whose absence is felt because their presence was genuine, meaningful, and impossible to replace. The final lesson may be the most important of all because it shifts your focus away from controlling other people and back toward mastering yourself. Robert Greene's ideas are often misunderstood as strategies for manipulation, but their deeper message is about understanding human nature, not exploiting it. The people who leave the strongest impression are rarely obsessed with being unforgettable. They're obsessed with becoming better than they were yesterday. They cultivate knowledge, discipline, emotional control, purpose, and a life that feels meaningful with or without external validation. That inner fulfillment changes everything. Instead of asking, "How do I make them crave me?" they begin asking, "How do I become someone whose presence naturally inspires respect, curiosity, and admiration?" The difference between those two questions is enormous. One comes from insecurity, while the other comes from growth. And people can sense that difference almost instantly. When your happiness is no longer dependent on another person's attention, your conversations become more relaxed, your confidence becomes more authentic, and your relationships become healthier because they are built on choice instead of need. Some people will be drawn to you, some won't, and that's perfectly normal. Trying to appeal to everyone only weakens your uniqueness. The individuals who truly connect with you will do so because they recognize something real, someone who knows their worth, without needing to announce it. Ironically, the less you force attraction, the more naturally it develops. The less you chase, the more space you create for genuine interest to grow. And the less you fear losing people, the stronger your relationships become because they're based on mutual respect rather than emotional dependence. In the end, the greatest form of influence isn't convincing people to stay. It's becoming someone whose character, confidence, and purpose make staying feel like the obvious choice. That's the psychology behind lasting desire, and perhaps the greatest paradox Robert Greene teaches. The moment you stop making your life revolve around earning someone else's attention is often the exact moment your presence becomes impossible to ignore. There's one final trap that quietly destroys attraction before it ever has a chance to grow, and it's the desperate need to be chosen. The moment your entire sense of worth depends on whether another person accepts you, you've already handed them the power to define your value. Robert Greene suggests that true influence begins with independence because people naturally gravitate toward those who are already fulfilled. Think about it. Have you ever admired someone who constantly begged for attention, reassurance, or validation? Probably not. Confidence isn't loud. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply exists. When you become emotionally self-sufficient, something remarkable happens. You stop reacting to every delayed message, every mixed signal, and every moment of uncertainty. Instead of assuming rejection, you remain grounded in your own purpose. That emotional stability is rare, and rarity creates value. People begin to notice that your mood isn't controlled by their behavior. They realize that your happiness isn't something they can give or take away. Ironically, this is when your presence becomes far more attractive than when you were trying to impress everyone around you. The greatest paradox of human psychology is that people are often drawn to those who don't desperately need anything from them. Not because those individuals are playing hard to get, but because they have built a life that feels complete on its own. They have passions to pursue, goals to accomplish, and a mission that extends beyond seeking approval. Relationships then become an addition to their happiness, rather than the source of it. And when someone enters your life from that position of strength, they don't meet a person searching to be completed. They meet a person who is already complete. That quiet confidence changes every interaction because it replaces fear with freedom, neediness with self-respect, and insecurity with genuine connection. In the end, the people who are remembered the longest aren't the ones who tried the hardest to be loved. They're the ones who lived so authentically that others couldn't help but wonder what made them different. And perhaps that's Robert Greene's greatest lesson of all. The more you invest in becoming your best self, the less you'll need to convince anyone of your worth, because the right people will recognize it without being told. So, If there's one lesson to remember from everything Robert Greene teaches, it's this: people don't crave perfection. They crave significance. They remember those who made them feel something they couldn't easily explain. Not through manipulation, not through endless attention, but through authenticity, confidence, and emotional discipline. The strongest form of attraction has never been about forcing someone to stay. It's about becoming someone whose presence naturally leaves an impression. When you stop competing for validation, you begin creating value. When you stop fearing rejection, you begin respecting yourself. And when you stop making another person's opinion the center of your world, you discover a freedom that very few people ever experience. That's the point where your energy changes. Your conversations become more meaningful, and your relationships become healthier because they're built on mutual choice instead of emotional dependence. Some people will misunderstand you, some will leave, and some will never recognize your value. And that's perfectly fine. Your job isn't to convince everyone to appreciate you. Your job is to become the kind of person who never has to beg for appreciation in the first place. Because real confidence isn't found in being desired by everyone. It's found in knowing your worth even when no one is watching. The people who truly belong in your life will be drawn to that quiet certainty, not because you chased them, but because you inspired them. And that's the greatest psychological secret of all. The moment you stop trying to become irresistible, here's often the exact moment your presence becomes impossible to forget.